studied in Bahía Blanca at Instituto Superior Juan 23. I did my teacher training there for 4 years and then 6 months of internship. And then I started teaching. I've been teaching for as long as I can remember. I think that dinosaurs roamed the planet by that when I started. And then I did my MA in ELT and Applied Linguistics with the University of London. In those days, that was at the beginning of 2000, the Asociación Argentina de Cultura Inglesa, based in Buenos Aires, had an agreement with the British Council and what was then Thames Valley University. And they set up a program for teachers overseas. And we did our modules partly distance and partly face-to-face. And then after 2 years of study, I had my MA. And well, I've been teaching children, adolescents, adults. I am a Cambridge examiner, and I've been giving presentations for Cambridge assessment here in Spain. I moved here in 2003, and in the meantime, I started writing. I started a career as an author by accident, really. And I've been writing since 1999, probably. And well, now most of my time now is devoted to teacher training, which is my passion, writing, and well, I usually give talks wherever they want me to. So,
I know that feeling.
I live in Salamanca, and I live in Salamanca here in Spain.
I know that feeling of I give talks wherever they want me to, like, you know, wherever they'll have me, I'll talk.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I know that Romina's also has done some training sessions in the Temple Development Hub, and in fact, it's where you and I met, as it were. We were speaking just before we came on that this is the first time that we've really spoken, but I think since March, I maybe know as much about you as I do about my own mum, to be honest, because, you know, I'm so into what you guys are up to on social media and seeing what you're doing. And I don't speak to my mum that often. I speak to you guys all the time. Like, I'm not sure if that's bad on my behalf or if that's, I don't know. But it's so good to have you on and to see you here and to have the chance to speak to you and get to know you a little bit better. So yeah, it is wonderful to have you here. And what I love about, you know, that with the presentations you just gave there, the talks that you just gave us and telling us about where it began and where it is now. It's just so nice to hear about all of this kind of passion that you've had for so long for English and for teaching. It's something that obviously runs like in your blood, basically. It's something that, you know, you can see that you love the language because you continue to learn about the language even now. And, you know, if you're an author, you must be continuing to learn about stuff because...
Absolutely. If you could have a look at my office here at home, I mean, I have shelves and shelves of books that I have read, I've been reading, I've bought, and I still have the to read list, which is getting increasingly bigger. Every time the bell rings, my husband says, "Another book."
Exactly. Yes, I've been buying many books online lately. And I've been reading a lot, and it's the same as Annie. I have lots of books to read that I want some of them to read for pleasure, some other books because I need them to when I do and deliver my talks, and it's good to do this research. And as we were speaking, I remember we were speaking, Harry, when before we came in the show, about the way we met and about this, I mean, the sort of the good side of this pandemic that has brought us closer with people that we probably wouldn't have been in touch with if it hadn't been for these and these, you know, needs to to adapt our classes and our courses to this remote reality. And it was fantastic to see you, because in my case, I had met Annie here in Buenos Aires when she came to give one of her marvelous talks, and then I met her again and over again in her talks. But Harry, in the case of you, it has always been online that I saw you, that I met you. And I remember, and I have to say thanks also to Simon Perlman and Teresa Bestwick from the Development Hub, because they open up this space in which we, educators from around the world, we could gather. And I remember when I saw Harry on the screen, I said, I've known this man from somewhere. Where is it that I met him before? And it was, in one of your marvelous talks that you developed for students in the projects with Pearson and the BBC.
The live classes, which actually are coming back for the next series very soon. Anyone who's excited about that, they're coming back in my next class, I think, is the 18th of October. So stay tuned for more of that. And you mentioned giving these talks, and you also mentioned the pandemic. Now, I recently did a poll on LinkedIn about conferences. Now, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, what do you prefer, an online conference or a face-to-face conference, I would have laughed in your face. I would have said, that's a stupid question. Of course, I prefer a face-to-face conference. Where else do I get my free food from? How else do I get to go and see these wonderful speakers? How else, I would have laughed at you, basically. And until now, I did do one online conference before TESOL Spain, but that for me, where I actually met Annie back in March, was probably one of the biggest turning points in my professional career. It was around the time that I was beginning to go freelance, and renewable English was kind of picking up and becoming more popular. But it was that moment where I realized the potential for online conferences and for online training sessions. Now, it was incredible. The amount of connections I made from it, Annie being one of them. There's a guy, Kevin, in Scotland, who I do volunteer classes with. So many people I connected with. Two of my other guests who have been on here. So Michaela from a couple of weeks ago, also from Argentina, and Militza as well, who was my second guest. I met all of them at TESOL Spain. And none of whom would have had the chance to go to TESOL Spain if it hadn't been remote. And some other benefits I found with the remote conferences is you don't have to fully attend everything. I know one thing I get when you go to a face-to-face conference, every session you go to, you're in there 100%, all your attention, and that kind of takes away from you. But with these online ones, you can use one of them maybe as a podcast while you walk your dog, or maybe you're doing the washing up, so you can have a listen, and they can be recorded and you can go back later. But I did discover this weekend, the first times I ever felt a real downside to an online conference. And it was at the Innovate conference in Barcelona. And I wanted to go to every talk. I just so desperately wanted to go to every talk. And it was from 10 in the morning till about 6 in the evening. And I also gave a talk there and a conference in Scotland. But by 4 o'clock on the second day, I couldn't anymore. I just couldn't take it. The Zoom fatigue was real. Now, I've never had Zoom fatigue quite like that. So I'm gonna ask Annie first about this, because she is one of the bigwigs of TESOL Spain. She's one of the bigger fish, as it were, when it comes to TESOL Spain. What was it like switching everything to online? How did it feel, and how did you deal with it, and how did you execute such an incredible conference like that?
Well, it was a roller coaster because we didn't know anything about running a conference online, but we said, okay, we have to, because we normally immediately after our conference, which the last one face-to-face was here in Salamanca, and we were praying to God, or the God of whoever, that everything would remain open until we finished. Because that weekend, there were serious conversations going around that everything was going to be shut down. So I think it was the last international conference to be held anywhere, because the following Friday we were locked down. So people were still optimistic that we would be able to have the face-to-face conference this March. And I was very pessimistic as months went by. I thought, no, this is not going to be possible. So we decided that no matter what, we were going to go online, because otherwise, if we had to cancel, just like IATEFL had to cancel or TESOL International had to cancel, that would have been the ruin of TESOL Spain. And that would probably mean that we would disappear as an association, because we can't afford that. So we are very lucky to have Ryan Gornell on the board, and he's our whiz kid. I always call him our whiz kid, because he's a really techie guy. He knows a lot about technology, and he was really the mastermind behind the technology of our conference. He started looking for options, and we decided to hire Hoover. It was the first time for everybody on the board, even for Ryan, because he had no experience setting up a conference like this. But Hoover really, and I mean, I am not on their payroll at all, but I mean, they were really very supportive. They helped us a lot. They made things easy for us, and we worked a lot. I mean, everybody was really very much into it. We had training sessions as monitors. We had training sessions with the speakers. It was more work, really, than the face-to-face conference. And we didn't know what it was going to be like.
But it was fantastic.
It was great, because all the facilities that Hoover gave us, and all the apps and all the resources that they gave us, it made the conference really interactive. But it was a roller coaster. It was a roller coaster, because we didn't know. Not until the first day was over could we say, okay, we did it. And we realized that it was very good, because, for example, with the communities that we had, there was a level of networking with Simon Perlman. I remember talking about this, and we said we may have made a lot more contacts this way than if we are in the actual site, because normally, when you are at a conference face-to-face, if I see a group of people, I don't just pop in and say, hello, I'm Aniel Tamirano, I would like to talk with you. No, I don't do that. Although people think I am not shy, I am quite shy, and I would never do that. But in the communities online, we did that, and it was okay. And that was how we networked with a lot of people. So, but we were exhausted. I mean, even if it was four half days, by the evening of Saturday, of the first Saturday, I was destroyed. I mean, it was like, oh my God. I can't sit in front of a screen for the next 24 hours.
I absolutely loved the way the thing you say about networking. It was amazing for me. I absolutely loved it. I like where you saw I was constantly on there.
Yes.
I was there. I was in every conversation.
Yes, it was like, but this guy never has lunch, never eat, never. I mean, he was always there, even when he was walking the dog.
Constantly. I got so addicted to it, and just meeting all these people. And like you say, when I go to a face-to-face conference, what I'll do is I'll walk into a room. I'll go straight for the people that I know. You know, I'll go for, if I'm in a conference in Athea or something, I always go straight to Teresa Bestwick. Go straight over there. And it's like, so what have you been up to for the last year? Cool. And then I'll look for somebody else that I know. And it's not very often that I'll go and just, I'm going to go and meet a new person because why not? Hi there. I'd rather stand in a corner and drink 8 cups of coffee and just get more and more nervous. So what do you think about the online conferences, Romina?
Yeah, well, I have to say that I was in TESOL, Spain, and it could show that all the work they have done before, all the preparation and the anticipation. I remember that I got contacted months before the conference went on by Anita Lutencourt. She was my host. And I remember that we met and we practiced and to see how the app, how Huba goes along. And that was, I think, something key. To me, that was key. That was essential. Because I will have to admit that every time we go online and we have to use a format that it's not the one we are used to using, it gives, gives us, this feeling of uneasiness, whether I like today, for instance, I said I was like a little bit like worried about the call to the radio show more than what I was going to say on the show. And so, but yeah, I think the one thing, I don't know, but at least I learned from the 2020 is that at the beginning, probably when we had to adapt our lessons to a new format, we insisted, or at least I insisted, on trying to adapt things as if they were going to work in the same way. And that was the big mistake, I think, that it was like, I always say this, it's like, well, you know how to swim, that's okay, that's great, but you need to swim in the ocean. You cannot swim in the snow. So the thing is this, well, we know how to teach and what to teach, but one thing is to teach on site or to give a conference on site, and another thing is to give it in a different format, in a different environment. So I think that was like the big lesson. We all, educators, especially the ones that, in my case, the 2020 was the first time I taught a lesson online. I hadn't had the chance before. So, having those either battles in one where I wanted to test my students in the same way that I had been testing for the many years I've been teaching. Okay, that was like, okay, forget about that. Find a new way to teach your students, to assess your students, because this is a different reality. And I've learned so many things and I adapted. And this sort of Darwinian philosophy, that if we want to survive, we need to adapt.
Exactly.
And so well, I love doing the online conference. I have to admit that I would love to have, the coffee after the conference, once the conference is over. The socializing, to get the chance to go to Madrid or to, I don't know, in November, I'll be giving a talk for Maryland, for TESOL Maryland, and then for TESOL France. And I would love...
We are going to be there, all of us.
We're going to be,
I think that you're starting it, Romina. You're one of the first ones on, and I'm one of the last ones on. So we're bookending the conference.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop you guys there for a moment. We're gonna pop off for an ad break and a news break, and when we get back, we're gonna get down to the brass taxes of it. And I don't like to say this, but I'm gonna say it. We're gonna talk about okay, I'm not gonna say it. People who are teachers of English who don't have it as their first language. And people who are teachers of English who do have it as their first language. That's how I'm going to phrase it. Other people say native and non-native teacher, but I would never say such a horrible thing. So I'm going to shoot off for the news. We'll be back in about 5 minutes, and we're going to get down to the brass tacks of it.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. The government has laid out plans to make offering, advertising, or providing essay writing services to university and college students for financial gain illegal. The new measure will be part of the Skills and Post-16 Education Bill, which hopes to transform further and technical education. The Department for Education said it hopes the criminalization of essay mill services will stop students from falling prey to deceptive marketing techniques from contract cheating services. The latest coronavirus figures show that 204,000 students were absent in England last week due to contracting or having close contact with the virus. This equates to 1 in 40 students off school in England, up from 1 in 80 on September the 7th. Teaching unions have called the statistics grim and fear it is the unvaccinated status of the majority of 10 to 19-year-olds that is causing the rise. That was your latest Teachers Talk Radio News.
Need support with your phonics teaching? Did you know Oxford University Press now has 3 DFE validated programs to help you? Read Write Inc Phonics, Floppy's Phonics, and the brand new Essential Letters and Sounds. Essential Letters and Sounds will get all your children reading well, quickly, using phonics books you may already have in your classroom. Developed by the Knowledge Schools Trust English Hub, it's affordable, easy to use, and makes teaching phonics with letters and sounds more effective. Whatever your school's phonics needs, Oxford has the solution. To find out more and receive support from your expert local educational consultant, visit oxfordprimary.com/phonics.
Hello everyone and welcome to the History Hotline, the hottest line for all things Black history and beyond. I'm your host, Deanna Lynn Cook, making space for honest conversations about Black, British, Caribbean and African history. Here to teach you all the things left out of your school books. Make sure you subscribe to the History Hotline on all good podcast platforms. Follow us on social media at the History Hotline on Instagram and at the History HL on Twitter to find out about new upcoming episodes.
Do you struggle with people pleasing? Is it a constant battle managing different and difficult personalities? Why not inspire, challenge and empower your team through the MAL CPD Essential Coaching Skills for School Leaders course, or gain practical skills to become a strong and compassionate leader through the Assertive Leadership and the Emotionally Intelligent Leader courses. All MAL CPD courses are accredited by the Institute of Leadership and Management. Find out more at www.malcpd.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. So, as I mentioned right before the news break, that we were going to talk about a debate that I find somewhat ridiculous. It is 2021, and it is completely, it's very silly. I think one of the main reasons for it is the business side of things, I guess, but it is the age-old debate of a native English speaker versus a non-native English speaker. Now, in Europe, now you're not allowed to advertise for a native speaker to work in your academy or your school. And in fact, it's very, very difficult for somebody from outside of Spain or somebody who hasn't studied here. It's quite difficult to get into the public education system because the public examination system's quite tricky, and but it doesn't stop the discrimination happening, which is kind of ridiculous. We have with us 2 guests, both of whom are non-native speakers, and I will quite confidently say both of whom are better teachers than I am, and I am a native speaker. So I'm going to, before saying too much about it, because I might just get angry and irate and start shouting about how ridiculous it is, I'm going to hand over to Annie and ask how Annie feels about this and how it's kind of affected her career. And then I'll let Romina take the stage after. Or you can talk amongst yourselves, because I'm sure you've experienced some of the same experiences. So ladies, I'm going to be quiet now. If Annie, you'd like to.
Okay. Well, I never experienced that in my own country. In fact, for a few years, I taught at Asociación Argentina de Cultura Inglesa, and I started teaching because I had to replace a native speaker teacher whose performance was very unsatisfactory. So it wasn't my experience in Argentina in those days. I don't know what it is like now, because I have been away from the country for the last 18 years. But in my time, even if you were a native speaker, you wouldn't be able to teach unless you had a degree, an official qualification of some kind. I mean, even private language schools, let alone the official side of things, because it's very different from here. Well, you know, Harry, because you were there. But in the private sector, no language academy who looked after its own prestige would hire a native speaker who was not a teacher, who didn't have some qualification. When I came here, the first cultural shock I had was not bullfighting, but being told that I wasn't able to teach English because I wasn't a native speaker. I remember that I started offering my services as a private teacher because, to begin with, when I wanted to validate my degree, I quickly found out that it was impossible, because let's say the degree that as a teacher of English does not exist in Spain. You are a filólogo, which has nothing to do with teaching. So I would have had to do the whole career again, and I said, no way. When I showed my MA diploma, my certificate, I remember that the lady in the ministry said, oh, no, but that's worth nothing. And I said, excuse me, this is a postgraduate degree, official degree, from a British university. And as far as I know, Britain is in the European Union. At that time, it was
at that time,
Brexit. So yeah, and soon I realized that in Spain, any course, even if it is, I don't know, arranging flowers in a shop window, any course you do that is more than 120 hours is called a master's. So I said, okay. So I started teaching privately. And I remember a lady calling because she wanted support for her 12-year-old child who had failed her exams. And so I said, well, this is what I charge. This is the time. Oh, but you are not a native, she said suddenly. And I said, I immediately realized what she meant, but I wanted to be ironic. So I said, well, I am a native, but depending on where you mean. And I said, oh, no, but you're not a nativa, which struck me as really stupid. And I said, well, if you mean a native speaker of English, no, I'm not. But I guess that you have never heard me speak in English, or you have never seen me teaching English. Oh, no, that's not what I need. I want a native. Clunk.
I think for me, what the real key in that is, there's something you just said there. It's not the necessarily as much you haven't heard me speak in English, is you haven't seen me teach. Now, right. I've done a lot of observations in my time, and I've observed a lot of non-native teachers and a lot of native teachers. Now, I can't say that all non-native teachers are good teachers. They're not, but they are almost always better prepared, because what they've done is they've spent their entire life dedicated to English, to teaching. That's like their passion. That is their career. That is what they want. A lot of native English teachers want to go on holiday. I, for example, learned how to be an English teacher by going to Argentina. I just wanted to get out of England. And to be honest, that's how I started. And I was a rubbish teacher for quite a long time because I had no idea. I did my CELTA, 120 hours. Suddenly, I'm as good as, in fact, I was suddenly better than people who had studied for years and years and years because I'd spent €800 and done a 120-hour course. Suddenly, I moved myself from being nobody to on top of the pile now because, I have quite a nice accent and I speak English and I'm a native. So they moved me up there. So it was, they haven't seen you teach. And that's, for me, the absolute key. Like somebody's teaching ability is not related to what they speak. Sorry, Annie, I interrupted you.
No, and there's another thing. I think that one of the advantages that we have as non-native speakers of a language is that we are successful models.
Exactly that.
Yeah, totally. I was going to say that. Yeah, I was going to mention that we don't have that problem in Argentina, and I think it is because geographically speaking, we are so far from everywhere. So we don't have the possibility of having native speakers, at least in the past 10 years. Before that, we might have had the possibility. And actually, I had colleagues from the United States and also from England. And but we never suffered that, what Annie is describing, like, not being granted a job because you're not a native speaker of the English language. But as I had this show and I wanted to come very well prepared, I found some interesting articles published. And apparently, for instance, in it's in North Carolina, they carried out a study. And they say that this was like something that was brought up on the stage, let's say, by school administrators, like thinking that the students who were going to enroll in courses would prefer to have a native English speaker teacher as opposed to a non-native one. And they carry out some a survey and they collected some data. And the evidence they found was that there are 10 categories, apparently, that students value the most in teachers, in any teacher, So irrespectively of the discipline we teach. And so, when it comes to languages, of course, it is oral skills, literacy skills, grammar, vocabulary, culture, ability to answer questions, experiences as an ESL learner, what just Annie mentioned before, teaching methodology, hard work, and affection. And so they grouped these 10 categories in 3 subgroups: linguistic factors, teaching styles, and personal factors, and how all these affect, the teacher as a whole. And of course, there were areas in which, because you are a native speaker, you excel at,
of course,
probably pronunciation, when it comes to pronunciation, to rhythm. But then, as you sort of learn the language naturally, because you learn it in your home environment, then you probably do not pay much attention to grammar, to the pattern and the structure of the language. So I ended up, after reading this, I'm going to send you this because it's very interesting.
Yes, please.
I came to the conclusion that it would be like the two of us, we should come across with, let's say, a whole, like saying, okay, the non-native, have all these strengths, and but they also have weaknesses in the same way as non-native teachers. So it's like the complement, to complement each other. Would be like this, and as you were saying, Harry, this is like kind of, I don't know what the debate it probably comes, from the side of, the school administrations, and they presuming and assuming that students and families are going to be looking for a native speaker. That as far as what Annie said, some are, very into, this idea of having a native teacher in front of their children or students.
I honestly think, out of all those things that you mentioned, about the only thing that a native teacher has over a non-native teacher, out of all of those factors, is pronunciation. and it's a natural pronunciation. And I'll be honest, some non-native teachers don't even have the nicest pronunciation in the world. You know, there are native teachers who don't pronounce words properly, but grammar is atrocious. I remember doing my CELTA, and somebody mentioned that in the past perfect, you had to use a past participle. And I just looked across like, you've got a past participle? Have you got antibiotics for that? That doesn't sound very nice. You know, and they mentioned the third conditional, and I was like, woof, is that when you put the air conditioning? Is that when it like moves around the room? Like, I had no idea about these things. So literally the only advantage I had was that I had, like, my pronunciation was good. But then, you know, I came here, I worked in China as well, and it's not done for any teaching reasons whatsoever. You cannot hire a native speaker over a non-native speaker for any teaching reasons. It's purely, in my opinion, done for marketing side of things, because there are those awful parents who think, oh, it's a native teacher, so therefore if they're teaching my student, my son will speak instantly and they will sound the same as them. They won't. Your student will not sound the same as me. Your daughter won't. And another thing that I got really angry about here when I started teaching, when I started teaching in a school, they said to me, you cannot tell the students that you know Spanish. And I was like, why? They're like, because they'll speak to you in Spanish. And I say, well, they won't, because I'll tell them this is English class, and in here we speak it in English. But they're like, yeah, but they can't know that you speak Spanish. Why not? I want them to know that I can speak Spanish. I want them to know that I've learned Spanish. I want them to know that I've worked hard to improve my level of Spanish. And, you know, I've been here for I don't want them to think, wow, he's lived here for 10 years and he can't speak Spanish, and he's in here trying to tell us to speak English. Well, he can do something with bad words. Like, it's not the impression I want to give. So that was one thing about it. And another thing, I mean, I really don't like the term non-native, because it number one, it's ridiculous. As Annie said, of course, she is native. She's native to Argentina.
That's right.
She is a native. She's not. English isn't her first language, but you know what? It's her second language, and she's pretty good at it. I'll be honest. But yeah, it was that thing, and we were talking about it just before we came on. And I don't want to take this away from you guys, because you came up with it. And I mentioned about having two scientist parents and so on. So I think it was, I can't remember who started it. So I'm going to let you guys jump in with it. I'll let you scrap over this idea about the non-idea.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and totally, we're not defined. That's very strange, yeah. When you say, well, you have to define yourself, but not by who you're not. That's like not that's not natural. That's like kind of ridiculous. I remember we had a conversation with Simon about this, like saying, you don't describe yourself as I am non-short or non-fat.
That's right.
So why that? But then, you know, you got me thinking about this when you were speaking, Harry, about the time when I was in England and I had to teach Spanish. And I remember that I did not feel confident at all. I had my students asking me several questions about, for example, why is it that we split the object when we speak Spanish? Yeah, sorry, not that we split, the other way about. You split it in English, we just put it attached to the verb in Spanish. And so I didn't have the answers for that, because I realized, I mean, I know Spanish, I learned it naturally. That was the language that was spoken at home. So, but then, and as I was living with a host family, I had the chance to do some tutoring for their little children. And so I remember I helped them with the homework English homework. And there I felt like I was more, you know, equipped. I was like better prepared for that. So basically what my point is that maybe it depends on what your objective is as a learner. For instance, if you just want to get a teacher because you're going to visit England and you want to know how they sound in London, for instance, maybe that would be great to have a native teacher, right? But if you want to do a course in which you're going to get into the language, that's going to be I mean, it's going to be the same as long as both teachers, you know, native and non-native, are, you know, have studied the language. And so basically that, it probably depends on your objective as a learner. What's your outcome? And what you are pursuing, what you're looking for in that teacher. Yeah. And as you were saying before, these, you know, this has stemmed from, you know, marketing reasons, administrative reasons. Yeah.
Sure. And something that many a times when I talk to people here in Spain, and they bring up this question of the native, non-native thing, and I tell them, okay, but when you mean a native speaker of English, a native from where you mean? Because it's like, I mean, I can tell you I'm a native speaker of Spanish, but I am a native speaker of Argentine Spanish. And within Argentina, you have different accents. The porteños speak in one way. I am from the province of Buenos Aires. We have a softer accent, but we speak very differently from the Cordobeses, from the people in Salta, in the north, depending on which part of the north. The same happens in every country. Here in Spain, for example, it's very different, the accent of a Galician from somebody from Andalusia, and in Andalusia, you have Sevillanos, Cordobeses, Valencianos. Sorry, Valencianos not in Andalusia. So a native English from where? Because you can have a native speaker of English from London, from Newcastle, from anywhere in Yorkshire, from Scotland, from Wales, from the United States, from different parts of the countries. So what do you mean when you speak? I want a teacher who is a native speaker of English. Okay, because they are excellent models of pronunciation. And as you said, Harry, depending the way that native speaker of English speaks, because one of my favorite sitcoms was Little Britain. And I remember Vicky Pollard.
Exactly.
I wonder what sort of role model for pronunciation Vicky Pollard can be. Would she be the perfect model for those parents?
Exactly.
I don't know.
And another thing you mentioned there, when they say native speaker here as well, you know what they mean by native speaker, because if somebody from Kenya came to their classroom,
absolutely,
a native Kenyan speaker, that suddenly is a whole different kettle of fish, you know. They are a native speaker. Oh, well, we didn't mean a native speaker. No, you didn't, did you? We know exactly what you meant. What you meant was a young, attractive, white person from England is what you mean. Like, but you're calling it a native speaker.
That's right. Actually, I've seen that happening. I'm not going to mention the company, but the language school I work for gives in-company classes. And in one department, they requested our services, and they specifically asked for native teachers of English from England. They didn't want Scots or Welsh, Irish, Americans, let alone African native speakers of the language. So even within the category, the broad category of a native speaker teacher, people still discriminate depending where that native speaker teacher is from, which it was something that let's say I used in a positive way when TESOL Spain, I was president of TESOL Spain when we issued our non-discrimination policy, which you can see on our webpage. And we were the first in Spain. And I think that after TESOL International and IATEFL, we were the first association to stand publicly against discriminating teachers on account of their passport. And I remember when we had the board meeting where we discussed this, my, let's say, non-Spanish or native speaker colleagues were worried that people from English-speaking countries would see this as an attack on them. And I said, no way, this is not. Because of this, and I gave them the example. So I said, listen, Karen, you're from Glasgow. You wouldn't be able to teach because they don't want you. They want somebody English. And somebody from Ireland wouldn't be able to teach. Tammy, you wouldn't be able to teach. You are an American. So this discrimination is not limited to the non-native teacher of English. It is also discriminating against people from English-speaking countries who are not, as you say, the typical white person from England, and particularly from the area of London.
Exactly. Exactly. Now I know that Romina has to depart in a few minutes, so I'm going to give Romina the last 5 minutes before we go off to the news. I'm going to say thank you very much for coming now, because I'd like you to speak a little bit. Now, we mentioned just before we came on about a football player, you know, so I'd love it if you could give us that analogy about a football player.
Well, we were just describing this idea of, if you're born into a house where football is, for example, something a popular thing, or you are born into a house where one of your parents is a footballer, and then so that you end up being a footballer, so then you are going to be like an athletic footballer versus maybe a non-athletic, that was the name we put it, a non-athletic footballer, if you were born into a house in which your parents are not from the sports side. And in the same way, what would have happened if, for instance, in the case of teachers of music, whether they had a musical background or they do not have a musical background. So it would have never occurred to any of us to say that we have like musical teachers of music versus non-musical teachers of music. So like that, like this division, or this, you know, this categorizing us into one thing or another is kind of, to me, it's ridiculous, even though I understand where this might be coming from. And it's good to do some research, and it's good to do, you know, to interview the students and to ask the students what they are looking for when they want to have a teacher in front of them teaching a language or teaching any other discipline.
Exactly. The way I thought of it as well was, you know, I like to imagine that if, you know, my parents had been doctors, you know, and I say, okay, well, my parents are doctors, so that means I'm a doctor. How about you come to me and I'll do your heart surgery? Both of my parents are heart surgeons, so therefore I'm a heart surgeon, right? Right. For me, that's the same as the native, non-native teacher. A doctor is a doctor because they've studied to be a doctor. They've spent years of their life studying, so they can open up your chest and fix your heart. I wouldn't want to do that. I'm not great with blood. But it's the same with a teacher. If your teacher has studied their entire adult life to become a teacher, then guess what? They're probably a pretty good teacher. Whether they're from England, Spain, Argentina, Kazakhstan, Kenya, Mongolia, wherever they're from, I'm pretty sure that, you know, if they've studied it, they're probably quite good at it and very passionate about it. So on that note, Romina, thank you very much for joining us. Have fun in your remote class.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Annie.
It was lovely to see you, Romy.
Lovely to see you guys. Take care and have a good evening, you there.
You too.
We will do. You have a lovely day. See you later.
Stay well. Bye-bye. See ya.
Will do. So we're going to shoot off for another news and ad break now. When we come back, it's going to be me and Annie all the way out till 5:30 if you're in Britain, 6:30 if you're here, 12:30 if you're in Argentina. I'm not sure.
No, 1:30
if you're in Argentina. That's it. Yeah, they're 5 hours difference, isn't there?
Yep.
Yeah, at the moment. Does that change? That changes when we go back and they go.
When we go, no, they don't change. We change.
Okay.
So it's going to be 4 hours.
Okay, so only we change. They don't change.
Yeah.
I'm already confused enough with time differences across the world. Now, can we all just stop changing the time so we can just keep the same time difference? Now, that's a debate for another day, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We'll be back in about 3 minutes after the news and the adverts, where Annie and I are going to continue the great debate.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. The government has laid out plans to make offering, advertising, or providing essay writing services to university and college students for financial gain illegal. The new measure will be part of the Skills and Post-16 Education Bill, which hopes to transform further and technical education. The Department for Education said it hopes the criminalisation of essay mill services will stop students from falling prey to deceptive marketing techniques from contract cheating services. The latest coronavirus figures show that 204,000 students were absent in England last week due to contracting or having close contact with the virus. This equates to 1 in 40 students off school in England, up from 1 in 80 on September the 7th. Teaching unions have called the statistics grim and fear it is the unvaccinated status of the majority of 10 to 19-year-olds that is causing the rise. That was your latest Teachers Talk Radio News.
Need support with your phonics teaching? Did you know Oxford University Press now has 3 DFE-validated programs to help you? Read Write Inc Phonics, Floppy's Phonics, and the brand new Essential Letters and Sounds. Essential Letters and Sounds will get all your children reading well, quickly, using phonics books you may already have in your classroom. Developed by the Knowledge Schools Trust English Hub, it's affordable, easy to use, and makes teaching phonics with letters and sounds more effective. Whatever your school's phonics needs, Oxford has the solution. To find out more and receive support from your expert local educational consultant, visit oxfordprimary.com/phonics.
Hello everyone and welcome to the History Hotline, the hottest line for all things Black history and beyond. I'm your host, Deanna Lynn Cook, making space for honest conversations about Black, British, Caribbean and African history. Here to teach you all the things left out of your school books. Make sure you subscribe to the History Hotline on all good podcast platforms. Follow us on social media at the History Hotline on Instagram and at the History HL on Twitter to find out about new upcoming episodes.
Do you struggle with people pleasing? Is it a constant battle managing different and difficult personalities? Why not inspire, challenge and empower your team through the MAL CPD Essential Coaching Skills for School Leaders course, or gain practical skills to become a strong and compassionate leader through the Assertive Leadership and the Emotionally Intelligent Leader courses. All MAL CPD courses are accredited by the Institute of Leadership and Management. Find out more at www.malcpd.com.
We're back. Hello there. Thank you for sticking with us. We're back for the last half hour here. Now, we're not just going to talk about non-native teachers and native teachers because I'll be honest, I think it is a fairly ridiculous argument. It's one that, you know, it's going to continue in Asia because it is in the school system over there. It's a big sales point for some schools over others. Yeah. I think it's becoming less that way here in Spain, particularly since Brexit, where it's harder to get new teachers over here. So they're kind of having to trust what is here now. They can't just ship in a new batch of 22-year-old people who don't want to be in England anymore. So it is kind of changing. We will touch on that as well, though. But I'd like to talk a bit more about you and your experience and a bit about poetry as well. But before I do that, I just want to say that I'm really, really happy today. Today has been a fantastic day for me because today I got solar power in my house.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So I am
Oh.
delighted. I am renewable English with
Yes.
renewable energy now. It's great news. We previously had it for our water, but we now have it for our house as well. And the fact that we have 320 days of sun a year is probably the best idea to do.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Because you are in the south, right?
I am. I'm in just outside Sevilla.
Yeah, that's it.
And I think it's rained about 5 times this year.
I sometimes wonder what makes someone from the British Isles go to places where in summer temperatures go up to 50 almost. I mean,
yeah, well, I think the big thing for me was when I was about 11, I lived in a place called Northampton in England. Now,
oh yes,
it's you know where it is. You're a well-traveled person. Not many people know where it is because it's quite rubbish. And
I've seen it on the map. I mean,
exactly,
I've never been there.
Yeah, well, you don't ever need to go there. I was inspired from about the age of 11 to leave the UK purely based on the fact I lived in Northampton. So yeah, as soon as I was 18, I left Northampton. I went to university in Canterbury. And then when I finished university, I went back to Northampton for a year. I worked 3 jobs to be able to afford to go to Argentina and to get out of the UK. So I then kind of traveled around just, as you do, as I could. That was the reason I became an English teacher, to travel around, not because I loved the language. And I probably wasn't the best teacher in the world, I'll be honest. But I did get hired frequently because I was a native speaker. And I used to be quite handsome. So I traveled around.
I'm sure you still are. Still are, if I may say so.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, I'm blushing. Nobody can see it, but I am blushing. So I then traveled around and I came to Spain initially with the idea of learning Spanish and coming back to Europe because I'd been out of Europe and I'd not seen my grandparents at the time for 3 years. I was like, I want to come back here in a place where I can be closer to my grandparents. So I originally went to Cordoba, the Spanish Cordoba, not the one in Argentina. And when I was there, I actually got really sick. And luckily, the Spanish healthcare system kept me alive and continued, thanks to good old healthcare here, which is really good, continued to do so for a further 8 years after that. And I guess it's still doing now. But I've loved bridges my whole life. And I really loved the Alamillo Bridge, which is the first ever single-sided suspension bridge. So that's what brought me to Sevilla. And then I would originally go back to the UK in August for the first few years. But recently, I don't know. It's hot here, but I think I've got used to it now. I just sleep a lot.
Yeah. No, I mean, my favorite season of the year is summer, but provided the temperature is reasonably high, which I think in parts of Andalusia, it is quite unreasonable.
Yeah.
And provided I'm close to the sea. I mean, Salamanca is not the best place to choose when you think about the things that I like, because here it's really cold in winter. Summers are quite hot.
And you're far from the sea.
Yeah, we are 3 hours away from the nearest coast. That is Portugal.
Yeah.
So, but luckily, my eldest son lives in Galicia. So when it starts getting hot here, we escape north. I pack all my things in the car and we spend the whole summer in the north. Because I love the Mediterranean. I think it's wonderful, but I like it in winter. So my ideal life in the future is from early October to May in Mojácar or Almeria, somewhere there. Yeah. And then from May till the end of September in the north in Ferrol or Coruña or somewhere near the sea.
Yeah.
I hope I can do that at some point.
Now, we mentioned very briefly before about the effect of Brexit on the native, non-native debate.
Yeah.
I've seen this year in various Facebook groups more than any year ever, so many like last minute requests from academies and so on and so forth, looking for teachers. I've never seen so many academies at the last minute desperately out there saying, we need a teacher, we need a teacher. Now, I imagine this, we can, thank Mr. Cameron for this and Mr. Johnson. But do you think it will have a positive effect for the non-native teacher, or for the teacher who has trained to be an English teacher their entire life, I might like to call them instead?
Yeah, well, possibly, but I'm not sure, because I think that there are plenty of native English-speaking teachers or people here who may consider doing a CELTA course and becoming a teacher, seeing that there is a job opportunity out there. I hope that this whole Brexit situation is going to affect the profession positively and give teachers whose first language is not English and who are properly trained. I mean, I have nothing against teachers from English-speaking countries who are properly trained. I think that the key here is teachers who are properly trained versus people who teach the language without being properly trained.
Absolutely.
I think that's the debate.
Yeah, 100%.
That's the thing. I mean, I'm not against an academy hiring you because they think that you are the profile they need. You are properly trained. You are a good teacher. But I would like to see that a person who is not from an English-speaking country and has the same qualifications has the same opportunity. It's a question of having the same opportunities. People of equal qualifications, with equal qualifications, having the same opportunities for getting a job. I think that 100%. That's basic.
Exactly, it really is. It was something mentioned on another LinkedIn post I saw. A Brazilian chap who said the most difficult thing for him when he started writing was his name. Because people would look at the name and be like, not an English name. So
it hasn't been for me, surprisingly. I started writing back in 1999 for Macmillan, Argentina. And it was a happy coincidence because, there were a number of issues that gave me this chance, and they didn't care. I mean, they knew me. Okay. I knew everybody in Macmillan because of my job in Argentina. I had lots of connections with people from the publishing houses, and they knew me. And so people in Macmillan thought, okay, you are the person who can do this. And I said, but I have never written a book. And they said, okay, but you write your own materials, don't you? Yes, I do. Okay, so you are the perfect person for the job. You know the job, you are a teacher, and you know how to write materials. And what you don't know, we can teach you. So that's how I started. And then I started writing for Macmillan UK, and then for Cengage, and then for Cambridge University Press. Right now, and this is by no means an ad, because I am a freelance author and trainer, but most of my writing is for a German publisher and for Cambridge University Press. And I do training for Cambridge University Press. And I've also done training for Pearson. And they don't care that I am not a native speaker. So this is something that surprises me. I mean, some people may think that this discrimination extends to other environments or other aspects of our teaching, of our profession. And no, I disagree. I am the living example of that.
I have to agree with you there on a lot of aspects. I mean, it may have been the case for this gentleman in the first instances. Maybe certain publishers or certain areas within his own country. I think he was from Brazil, as I mentioned. But for me, a lot of the people I've connected with and So I've been writing now for not very long. Well, I've actually been writing for about 8 years, but properly writing and being published for a couple of years now. But most of the people that I get advice from, that I talk to, that I see online, and the books that I read, they're not native speakers, because when it comes to writing a book, when it comes to having that knowledge of it, you need to have the knowledge, you need to have the experience. You don't need to be able to,
you don't need to have an Oxonian accent.
Exactly. Exactly. Your accent doesn't matter at all. And
That's
I can guarantee that your grammatical knowledge of English is far superior to mine. I mean, mine's all right now. I've been teaching for 15 years, so I've actually caught up from back when I was in Argentina, and I couldn't tell you a past participle from a modal verb. And I guess quite a few people in the UK probably still can't, to be honest.
But that's the same case Romina mentioned. I mean, if you ask me to teach you Spanish, well, I would have to sit down and study first, because I wouldn't be able. I mean, if a foreigner asks me to explain the difference between ser and estar, oh my God, I have to go get some grammar books and study, because I don't know. I mean, out of the blue, I cannot figure out how to. But if you ask me, okay, what's the difference between the past perfect and the present perfect, and I can tell you that in no time.
Yeah, I struggle with ser and estar, I'll be honest.
That's right, but I wouldn't be able to explain to you the difference, because I've been using the language ever since I started speaking when I was a baby.
Yeah.
But I had language Spanish lessons at school, in secondary school, but that was long ago. I mean,
yeah. I always tell this story to people when I'm talking about Spanish. I still make a lot of mistakes with ser and estar. I haven't studied grammar for a very long time. I learned most of my Spanish from being here and being interested in the language and reading and doing the things that you need to do when you go to another country, or that you should do when you go to another country. Maybe not that people do, but I have one classic example of me making quite a bad error, actually, when somebody asked me at the end of a class, we were leaving, and my daughter must have been 3 at the time, and they asked me, is she a good kid? And I said, sí, está buena. And I should have said es buena, and that's one of the differences, because está buena, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, means she's like really hot. She's really attractive.
That's right.
And the person kind of looked at me like, I don't think you meant to say that. And I've also made the mistake of, when you're hot, you say tengo calor. I have hot. I've also made the classic error of saying estoy caliente, which means I'm hot, but for something else. I'm hot for other things that aren't appropriate to talk about on a radio show.
That's right.
So there are these funny errors, but it's good as a language learner to have them and to be able to laugh at them. And I love taking those into the classroom and telling my students that I've done this. And they kind of sit there and laugh quite a lot, because one of my students, he was talking about in his house, he has a corner where he did manualidades. But he translated it into English, and he said, I have a corner for hand jobs. And I was like, no, you can't say that. You can't say that. And I burst out laughing, and he just looked at me and was like, manualidades. I was like, no, it's not the same. No, it's really quite different. It's, you do handiwork there maybe, but definitely that is not what that's the corner for. I don't think your house is built like that, Alvaro. So it's good that you can laugh at yourself, but students need to learn to be able to laugh at themselves, and that takes away that fear of making mistakes, because we all make mistakes.
Of course.
And it's another thing I talk about with the people who have English as their mother tongue, as a first language. You look on Facebook, and you'll see you're, there, all wrong. Effect, all of them wrong. But if you say to a 7-year-old student, write your, they'll know if they're writing you are or you're belonging to you. A 7-year-old student will know it instantly. And if you tell them that people back home will make a mistake with it, they'll just look at you like, why? Why would they make a mistake? They're two obviously different things. So, native people are quite bad as well.
Well, yes, and happens in all languages, because when I read Facebook posts in Spanish, my eyes sometimes bleed. It's, my God, the spelling mistakes. And just to think that Facebook has a checker, a grammar checker, a spell checker, but no, they wouldn't pay attention. And sometimes you see things and say, listen, but don't you have a dictionary at hand?
Exactly. Doesn't your spell checker work? Like,
that's right.
Echar and stuff like that, using the wrong H, not putting an H in, or putting an H in there for fun.
Yes. B and V. Well,
yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. I've seen a lot. I think my favorite, though, is when I tell people my name. I've had to adapt it now, because I used to say, me llamo Harry. My name is Harry. Jari. It's like, no. Harry como Harry Potter. It's just the automatic now. It's like, I'm Harry, like Harry Potter. That's just my entrance now.
Yeah.
I walk in with that. Now, we've still got 15 minutes, and something I love, and I know you love it as well, is poetry. Now, next week, we actually have a poet coming on. He's a former headmaster from the UK. His name's Dave Bowden, aka the word guerrilla, or word gorilla, as we'd say in English. And he's coming on, and he works with writing for mindfulness. You know, so he uses it to help him like see his, get all his bad thoughts out and focus on the good thoughts. And I've been to one of his sessions before. He's got another one tomorrow. It's called a detention session, like detention and detention. So that's actually on tomorrow at 9. So I'll be going there along to that. Anybody who wants to join, it's on my Instagram page. But you're also a poet, aren't you?
Well, yes, but I write in Spanish.
Still a poet?
Well, yes, but I mean, people ask me if I write in Spanish or in English or in both, because there are people who write in both languages. But I write in Spanish. I haven't tried my hand at writing poems in English, although I very much like to do it. But I feel that I am still a poet in the making, so I'd rather do it in my own language. And although I dream in English and I can switch from one language to the other, but when it comes to poetry, I feel more comfortable writing in Spanish. And yes, I love poetry, and I love reading poetry and poetry from different parts of the world. Yes,
I think
there's a lot out there.
Yeah, and I think there's quite a huge difference actually between Spanish and English poetry in the fact that, I mean, obviously, it comes from the heart. It's something that comes from within you. So writing in something that isn't your first language would be difficult, but particularly in the way the two languages sound. Now, that's so important in poetry. Now, I'm not saying that everything has to have rhyming couplets in poetry. Obviously, it doesn't.
I don't write using rhyme. I mean, it's free verse. But,
exactly.
The sound and rhythm of both languages is very different.
It's so different. I mean, reading Lorca. It's lovely to read Lorca, but I've read some of his poems translated, and it's just a bit wrong, to be honest. It's not. The first time I did it, I read it because I wanted to make sure I knew what I was reading, but it's just not the same for me. That's a bit like watching Casa de Papel, or Money Heist, as it's called in English, with it dubbed in English, or any film, as they do here in Spain, as you know. Their obsession with dubbing films over. So they'll take an English film and they'll dub it, and everybody will watch it that way and be okay with it, which for me is the same as reading Lorca in English. It's like, you can't do that. You can't.
Well, actually, translating literature is quite difficult, and translating poetry, I think, is particularly difficult. I was trying to translate my own poems. It was something that I have a friend in Argentina, Sergio Soler. He is a poet and a teacher of English, and we planned to translate our own poems to see how it feels. And when I read the translations, I thought, no, this is not right. I mean, the rhythm changes. It's very difficult to translate poetry. Mm-hmm. Either you write it in English or you write it in Spanish. That's what I feel. I mean, I admire the work of translators, of literary translators, and particularly of people who translate poetry, because it is such a difficult job. Such a difficult job.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult. Like you say, because I've read quite a bit of poetry in Spanish, and I've been there and I've sat there and I've translated it in my head at first so I can fully understand the meaning of it, because I sometimes do that still. And it doesn't come out right. Now, the big thing for me when I came to Spain, the big challenge I set myself was to read Quixote in Spanish.
Oh.
Because, it's a classic and I'd read it in English and I hadn't.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
I haven't been able to go beyond page 10.
Exactly. I didn't particularly enjoy it in English. I mean, I was forced to read it in English and I didn't particularly enjoy it. And I thought, what's all the fuss about? Like, why is this such a huge thing? Like, every school you go to, there's always an exposition, an exhibition on Quixote. And it's like, but why? Because it's rubbish. I was really like, this is just a really long, boring book. And I read it in Spanish and was like, because I'd always wanted to. And that was, I think, maybe the third book I read in Spanish. I was like, it isn't rubbish.
No, it's not rubbish, but I mean, I haven't been able to go beyond page 10. The funny thing is, I have read Ulysses twice. The first time because I had to, because it was on the syllabus of contemporary literature at a teacher training college, and the second time because I wanted to enjoy it. And people, when I say that I read James Joyce's Ulysses twice, they look at me and said, "What? And you haven't been able to read the Quixote? You're mad." Yeah, probably. But that's the way it is.
Yeah, and also that's the thing with books. Like, some of them are to your liking, to your gusto, and others aren't.
Of course.
My daughter is an avid reader. She loves reading. And at first, like, she was reading her books and, then she'd stop and start reading another one. She'd have 5 or 6 books on the go at once. And at first I was like, why don't you finish a book first? She's like, because I wasn't enjoying that book, so I thought I'd start another one. And eventually she'll go back to it. But there have been some books that she's got halfway through and just gone, I don't really enjoy it. And so I've said to her, if you're not enjoying it, don't carry on reading it. What's the point in forcing? But you kind of get that feeling with a book, like, I need to finish this. I've started, so I need to finish it. If you don't like it, then you don't like it. Go and find the books that you do like.
There was a time when I was just like that. I mean, I would finish a book no matter what. It was a matter of principle, possibly. Never leave a book unfinished. Until one day I came across something that Borges said about if the book hasn't caught your attention, hasn't trapped you, leave it. Why waste time that you can devote to another book that you will like? So
exactly.
I said, okay, I felt he had given me permission to abandon books that I didn't like.
Well, the problem I find with if I get a book and I'm reading it and it's not what I enjoy and I have to fight my way through it, it will take me,
ages.
2 weeks to read a book when it usually take me through maybe 3 or 4 days. And then after I've finished reading that book, it will take me longer to find another book to pick up because I just be like, that book was horrible.
Yeah.
And if from now on, if I'm not, if it's not a page turner, if I'm not there at night thinking just one more page, then it's like, do you know what? If I'm not enjoying it, I won't read it. I'll just put it down, and I'll find a book that I do like. But yeah, that's just, that's me giving people permission, if you don't like a book, to put it down. Unless it's the book that I'm writing, in which case you have to read it from cover to cover and then buy it 6 times. It's not released yet, but it is in the making. So yeah, poetry and reading are 2 of your enormous passions. Something I know.
Yes.
And we talked.
And what I try to do is, when I was teaching children and teenagers, particularly teenagers, I always brought poetry to the classroom and pieces of literature. I remember reading Shakespeare, reading Macbeth with my students, with my 17-year-olds, and they loved it. And but it wasn't analysis; it was enjoying it. And I do a lot of teacher training using poetry and literature, because I think that poetry has to have a place in the language classroom, and not just for teaching language, but also for teaching values and teaching other things.
Exactly, 100%. Now, for me as well, when it comes to poetry and it comes to literature and reading and anything really, in that respect, getting students to read. When it comes to poetry, it doesn't have to be the classics that you go with. It is nice for them to understand classics and read some classics, but like I mentioned, the word guerrilla, he's a slam poet. His poetry is, it's almost like rapping, and when you see him doing that in front of a group of like 7, 8, 9-year-olds, and you see them all there just enthralled by the performance of this incredible poetry, you just think, poetry is amazing, and it is something that needs to be in the school.
And Benjamin Zephaniah, I'm totally intellectually in love with the man. He's a fabulous poet and a fabulous performer. Inu Alams, he's another one. He's great. I just bought this one by a guy called Theophilus Queck. I saw him, when was it, on Saturday? It was the I came across this young man through Twitter. There was a poetry page I follow, a poetry page I follow on Twitter from Britain, and it was him and 2 girls. They are all very young, and he is his family is Vietnamese or Korean, I don't remember, and the 2 other girls are half Chinese. And I found his poetry, he read a few poems, and I found his poetry fantastic. And he's young. And I said, okay, I have to read more. And so I bought the book, of course. And now I am waiting for the post to bring the other books of the other 2 girls. And I think that this is wonderful, because I could see them reading their own poems. And I mean, they got me, like, oh, I would love to go on listening to you. And this is not something that happens to me very frequently when poets read their own poetry, because quite often they are rubbish reading their own poetry. And these 3 young people were wonderful. So I think that there's a lot out there for young people to relate to poetry.
Absolutely. I mean, when it comes to the word guerrilla, and as I mentioned, Dave, I'm going to his detention session tomorrow. So hopefully from that, I will have a poem of my own to bring. So in next week's show, when I'm speaking to him, hopefully you'll hear me perform some poetry.
Good.
You'll see if I'm rubbish at performing my own poetry. Now, don't say you don't think I will be, because now if I am, then it'll be, But I've been practicing with, I do quite a lot of storytellings and stuff like that. Yes. So I've actually got a storytelling at 7 o'clock tonight. I can show you the book, but I can't show anyone else. It's The Smeds and the Smooths by Julia Donaldson. And it's all about, it's basically about Brexit. It's about loving everybody and accepting everybody, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from. So I've got this with a group of 8 to 10-year-olds. So with Julia Donaldson, it is all rhyming couplets and so on and so forth. So I'll be practicing with that today. So hopefully next week I won't let you down.
Good.
But that is our time. We have run out now. We are at an end of the show. Somebody loves the Smeds and the Smooths, which is great news. Thank you, GM Bream. I absolutely love it as well. It is fantastic. It's been wonderful having you on, Annie. It's been great to finally actually speak to you and not only connect through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter,
and LinkedIn.
Exactly. That's so yeah. It's lovely to see you, to speak to you. I did drop you a mention in the little thing I wrote the other day. So that will be hopefully out soon. I don't want to say too much about it to spoil it, but It's been amazing. It's been a pleasure. And I'm going to end the show now by saying, don't forget to tune in next week for the word guerrilla. We're going to be talking poetry and mindfulness. And thanks again, Annie. You've been great.
Thank you, Harry, for having me on the show. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thanks very much, guys. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.